Welcome to my studio on this rainy fall day. I was recently commissioned to do 4 pet portraits for a client's nursery, which is like the most fun idea ever. So today I'm going to start on the first one, and I wanted to take you along with me and kind of show you a little bit of my process. We've seen it before. I have a ton of videos about my process, but I wanted to talk in particular about how I work when I'm doing a commission versus teaching a class or just practicing. So today we're going to paint this guy. This is Goose, and his ear is always like that, which is so cute. So we're gonna paint Goose today. I have already brought him into Procreate, and I wanted to mention, since the last video where I talked about my process with the reference photo, I actually discovered you can do all of this in Canva. So you don't need Procreate. You can do it on your phone, your computer, your laptop, your iPad, using Canva, which is totally free. If you'd like to even remove backgrounds, you can do it in Canva. So I'll put the link to Canva in the description, but I wanted to mention that for you guys. And I'm not going to show you my process on the reference photo because that has been done in another video. So I've already brought it into Procreate. I've adjusted color, temperature. Yeah, I've done all the things as we talked about before. The link to that video will also be in the description. Let's go ahead and start. This is kind of a part 2 of last week's video where I talked about how I prepare for a pet portrait painting. So if you missed that one, you may want to pause this video and run over to that one. I will put it in the description and see if I can put a card, if I can figure that out. And yeah, go watch that one first. Then you can come back here and watch me finish the rest of the painting process. But yeah, I really enjoy the preparation that goes into a pet portrait. So but if you did see it, you're good to go. And here's just a little recap of my sketchbook and my swatches and everything. Let's get started. The first thing I do is lift the graphite off the sketch. My sketch has already been done. I traced it using the DaVinci Eye app. You can look that up. It's a great resource. When I'm doing a commission specifically, I want to make sure that I'm getting everything where it should be. My clients, they know and love their pets. And so I want to make sure my drawing is spot on, and watercolor is really where I shine. So that was just my kneaded eraser, and I kind of just rolled it across the paper to lift any extra graphite. I am careful not to lift too much because that sketch is a map for me. And then here I am in Procreate, and I know I mentioned I wouldn't show a lot of that, but I just wanted to show you that I was trying to pick a different color for the eyes, and I hadn't done that before, so I decided to go ahead and mix something for the eyes. I always start with the eyes. If you've watched any of my process videos, you will know that I have kind of a 5-step process. Step 1 is the eyes. I always do them first. It anchors me to the painting. Once I see those puppy dog eyes staring back at me from the page, I am committed to finish this painting, even if I do hit the dreaded ugly phase, which actually is happening less and less for me. So I start with the lighter values in the eye, and the lightest values are either the highlights or the iris. It's a lot easier to paint black over light brown than it is vice versa. Now here I am using Neutral Tint by Daniel Smith, and I'm kind of obsessed with these watercolor sticks. This one's got a divot in the middle because I really only use it with a small brush. And I will use that to go ahead and fill in all the black areas on the eye. So Neutral Tint is my go-to for black. I believe it has, I want to say ivory black in it, and 2 other colors of violet, and don't quote me on this, I know it has another color, but anyway, It does lean a little more purple. So if I want to neutralize it, if I'm going to use it lighter, then I am going to add some like burnt umber or something to it. So yeah, these eyes were pretty easy. I just left out the highlights, I did the iris, and then I did the blacks. Super, super simple. Now I'm going to start on the left eye. I always do the right eye first, just so I don't drag my hand through the left eye. And I'm drawing between each layer. That is so important. A lot of people get frustrated. Why are my watercolors not turning out? And then they find out that, yeah, they're not drying between layers and things are just kind of bleeding together. Hey, we've all been there. So, same thing as the left eye. And avoiding highlights. I used to use masking fluid for highlights and whiskers and whatnot, but I have since stopped that practice. I don't feel like I need it anymore. If highlights are really, really tiny, I will just use like an opaque white at the end, as you'll see. Doesn't bother me. And here I'm using a silver black velvet brush in size 2, which is my smallest silver black velvet. I do have smaller brushes. The reason I like the silver black velvets is they're really soft. They're a synthetic squirrel mix, I think. And they're so soft that they force me to use a gentle hand. When I use a stiffer brush, I find that I'm trying to be more controlled. Okay, this is where I make something called dirty water. So dirty water is where I have more water than pigment. And I made kind of a gray color, and it's for that inside area of the eye. And dirty water is something that I use for white areas that are not quite white. I will use it for the teeth inside of the mouth, anything like that white area of the eye. The whites of the eyes are never white. Like very rarely are they white. So I will use dirty water for that. All right, step 2 is the nose / muzzle. If there's a tongue hanging out, we'll do that, and all the mouth parts, and that's all in step 2. So here I am using Hematite Genuine for the inside of the nose, and again using a stick. And this is my really tiny 20/0 liner brush. I got this at Hobby Lobby for like $4. And I tell you what, it is a stiffer brush, but I have been using it like crazy. And I love that it's a short-handled brush. So I use that for really tiny stuff. So I always do the darkest values of the nose first. I know it's counterintuitive. A lot of people just do a wash of like the highlight color. Not me. I want to anchor myself. Like I said, I need to make sure I get those darkest darks down so that I'm anchored. I know where everything is going to go. If I put a wash down, sometimes I lose my pencil marks. I get lost. I don't know what I'm doing. I like to compare it to like Hansel and Gretel and their breadcrumbs. Like they threw breadcrumbs down and the birds ate them and they couldn't find their way home. So by doing the darks first, I'm essentially throwing out breadcrumbs for myself. Hey, this is where these things go. And then I can add a wash of the highlight color. So I usually do darkest darks first, then a wash of the highlight, and then the midtones come in somewhere in the middle. It's quite fitting, actually. And so here I am doing some wet and wet, and I've got that glorious Hematite Genuine stick. And I slow-moed it so you could see how satisfying these sticks are to use. All right, so I'm just adding more layers and drying between each layer. Sometimes between layers I will re-wet it and do wet and wet. You can totally do that. This brush is my Polina Bright brush. I've had these since 2021 and they've kind of just been sitting to the side, and recently decided to pull them out and use them, and I love them. I forgot how much I love them. They are a stiffer brush, but they have a really fine point on them, and they do help me to loosen up quite a bit just because of their size. I'll put a link down in the description to the Polina Bright brushes. She also has mop brushes. So now I'm just deepening. What layer is this? Layer 4. Deepening and darkening this nose. And you can see I avoided the highlight. And if you ever see me pausing, it's because I'm looking at my reference, plain and simple. I'm just constantly looking back and forth at my reference photo. And of course, drying between layers. If I can avoid using a heat tool, I will. I like things to settle naturally into the, into the little textures of the paper and let the granulation happen. But sometimes I'm in a hurry and I can't do that. So back to my neutral tint. I just felt like those nostrils weren't dark enough. And so I went ahead and darkened them up. There I go again, pausing, looking at that reference. I made sure in this video to have a mixture of real-time painting as well as time-lapse painting. I didn't want this video to be 3 hours long. And so we've got hopefully a good mixture of the time-lapse versus real-time. I really think it's important. We scroll Instagram and what do we see? We see all these really fast, amazing paintings. They make it look so easy. And then when we try to do it, it's like, what the hell? And we get frustrated. And so I want to make sure that you understand that it is a slow process. It isn't as easy as it may look. So I'll hop down off my soapbox now, but I'm just doing the muzzle area, super easy. So what I'll do is if I put paint down on dry paper, like that's wet on dry, if I do some wet on dry, I always make sure to clean my brush off and then use it to kind of feather things out. I will choose selective areas that I'll soften and I'll leave some hard edges. I really like the idea of lost and found edges, and so that's what I do. I usually don't do any wet and wet until after I've already laid down a layer. This brush is the smallest Polina Bright brush, and boy, that tip is so sharp and tiny that I can really get some good details in with it. Okay, so I normally work in sections and I don't do any of the face till after I've done the ears. And sometimes it gets away from me if I don't create a section. And so that's what's happening here. I'm breaking my own rule. And of course, like, rules are meant to be broken. It's my rule. It happens. Sometimes I just get crazy and I bleed into other areas of the painting when I promised myself I would stick to my system. And the reason I have my system is to avoid the ugly face. Honestly, like, the best way for me, and I know myself and I know my brain, yours is different, I'm sure, but the best way for me to trick my brain is to work in a system with certain sections and stick to it. So I broke my own rule and I painted the side of the face. So anyway, I realized my mistake and I calmed myself down. Step 3, ears. I always start with the left ear first. And the reason is really because I like to put my hand down on the paper while I'm painting just for support. And so if I paint the right ear first, sometimes if it's not dry and I go over to the left ear, I'm going to smudge the paint. That's really all it is. It's just something kind of practical from bad experience, technically. And so, make rules for yourself. Find out what works for you. And you're going to have to find out, unfortunately, through quote unquote negative experiences. I'm at the point where almost every painting something goes quote unquote wrong, or something doesn't go according to plan. But what I've realized is it's our expectation of what's supposed to happen that creates our suffering. And that goes further than just painting. That is like a life thing. And so applying that to painting has been huge for me because suddenly I am changing my expectation. I know that every painting has surprises in store. Every painting is going to teach me something new. And so rather than getting frustrated with the process, just say, what am I learning? What am I learning from this? And how am I growing as an artist? I promise it will make the painting process much more enjoyable. So you could see on that ear, I did the lightest lights, which is the pinks are the lightest values. So I did the pinks first, and then I went in with the darkest darks, and then I went in with my midtones. So highlights, darkest values, and midtones. That's how I roll. It's just what works for me. All right, now it's time for old righty, right ear. And as you can see, this one doesn't have any pinks or any highlights. So I just went in with the darkest values and laid them down. And then I cleaned my brush. Well, I haven't yet. I'll lay down the darkest darks and then I'm gonna clean my brush. And I'm gonna use that to kind of blend things out. And then you can lift. I do this quite often. I will use my brush that's been wiped off to lift paint that's wet. So you can lift while the paint's dry and you can lift while it's wet because the brush acts like a sponge. Here I am going back over to the other ear and wetting things down, adding a little bit more, and you'll see me go back and forth through this process. I love this ear. How fun is this dog? I posted all 4 of these paintings on social media the other day, and everybody went crazy over Goose because of his cute ear. He's got such personality. All right, step 4, face. And I know I jumped ahead. That's okay. Before John. You know, I think the reason I like watercolor is because it forces me to get outside of what makes me feel safe in this world. So my whole life I've had a tendency to be an anxious, kind of controlling person. I wanted things to be just so that I could feel safe in the world. And as I have worked on myself and as I have grown as a person and I've matured, I think that more and more I'm finding ways to hack my brain essentially. Just like I have that system for painting, we have to, when we know ourselves, when we understand our tendencies, we can kind of hack ourselves. And so for me, watercolor forces me to let go and say, all right, look, I understand you're going to behave this way. This is just how you are. I love that about you. And I'm going to partner with you so that we together can create this beautiful work of art. And there's a part of like letting go and realizing that watercolor, like, why do we love watercolor? We love it because it's wild. We love it because it's fresh. It has this luminosity to it. And we don't want to lose that by being overly controlling. Now I say that, and you're seeing this like hyper-realistic painting here. But you will see as time goes on, I will start to get looser and looser as I go. This one I didn't get as loose as I normally do. Normally there's some splashes and there's some splatters. And on these ones I didn't get as splattery. So on the face, I am just darkening those darkest values. This is kind of a dance, especially with fur and especially with short fur that kind of has that shininess to it. So the reason I say it's a dance is because as this painting goes on, you're going to see me laying down paint and darkening areas, and then you're going to see me lifting paint and lightening it back up. And that's kind of how it goes. I haven't really had a painting where I lay everything down and it's perfect and away I go. There's this back and forth of adjusting things, trying to get it right. And I'm hoping that as time goes on and as I have more and more experience with this, that will be less and less. But I haven't painted every single dog yet. I'm a baby in my journey if I really think about it. Yes, I've painted a lot of dogs, but I haven't painted all the different fur colors and fur textures that are out there. And so this pit bull is my very first pit bull. And so it has a different texture to it. It has a different look to it. So it's really fun when a client hands me a dog that I've never painted before, because I know it's going to be a challenge, but I also know that I'm going to learn a ton. Okay, something I want to point out, you see my cloth there next to my painting. I will use a paper towel folded up for lifting, but I mainly use these cloth napkins. And they're so amazing. So they're 100% cotton. You just get them at Home Goods or wherever you buy your cloth napkins, but they absorb so much water. Now, I don't use fabric softener when I wash them because that repels water. So I want to make sure that they're good and thirsty. But the point is, I always have it right there. That is how I do water control. So having something to wipe my brush on constantly, like every time I grab paint, I'm going to tap the brush right next to the ferrule, the metal part where the bristles come out of the brush. I'm going to tap that on the towel just gently, just to pull out any excess water, because water control is a huge part of watercolor. So you'll notice that as time goes on, that I will rinse my brush, tap my brush, grab some paint, tap my brush. I'm constantly controlling water, and that's just something that comes with time and experience. So don't be upset if you're not quite understanding that yet. It comes with actually painting. And guys, I say this over and over. I've said it in like every video I've ever made. I learn more from my so-called failures than I do from my successes. I really do. And so every painting that I feel, this didn't turn out how I wanted, instead of getting frustrated, attaching any kind of like intrinsic value to it as a person, I just go, okay, what did I learn? And how could I do? Do I understand where I went wrong? And do I know what I could do differently next time? Because I think that's where the value lies. I would never want a failed painting to be a waste. And that's up to us. Whether or not it's a waste is up to us and our mindset. So, yep, I am over on the left side of the face now. Did you see me lifting just now? Brushes can be like a sponge. If you've got wet paint and you just lost a highlight, just clean your brush off, dab it on your towel, get it dry, and then you can use that to suck up the wet paint. It's perfect. I'm just going fast for you so you can kind of skip past that and see what I'm doing. We've got midtones happening, and I'm just deepening, deepening, deepening. I think that fur or hair is where people get the most frustrated, and it really just takes layering. Every time I'm doing a dog specifically with short hair, I have this point where I'm like, did I ruin it? Am I gonna get there? But I just keep going. And it is a delicate balance. So step 5. Step 5 is like the rest of the body. So if I've done the face, everything's done. The nose, eyes, mouth, ears, everything's done. The face is done. Next and last step is the neck and the chest. And that's where I get the loosest. That's where I use the largest brush and have the most fun. And I say that, but on this one, I did not switch up to a larger brush. I don't know why. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Goose is cream filled. And what I mean by cream filled is that he's got the white in the middle. He's got the white down the center and on his chest. And the dark color is only barely on the sides of his shoulders. And so I didn't want to get too crazy with it because I knew that there was a lot of white happening. So do you see how I laid down paint on dry paper? And then I grabbed my brush, cleaned it off, dabbed it off, and then used that to kind of here and there selectively soften and let things bleed. That's lost and found edges. I also left little bits of the white paper. That's something new that I'm doing. I feel like the letting go, loosening up process is going to be a never ending life goal for me. Like, it's just against my nature. And so I'm working on it. We're all in this together of trying to loosen up. I love the hyperrealism. I always want to make sure that the eyes and the nose are like really realistic and tight. But then there's this beautiful dichotomy, almost like a yin yang, when you go from that to like a more loose and splashy on like ears and body. Now, on this specific group of pet portraits that I did for this client's nursery, I did keep them a little bit tighter just because I knew, I don't know, I just felt like they should be. I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes your intuition just kind of tells you something. And so I went with it. Okay, so I've got the chest done. I'm loving it. I'm just going back to the face. And here's the funny thing about watercolor. It always dries lighter. It always does. And you're just like, oh, here we go again. So you're going to have to layer a ton. And that's tricky because we also don't want to overwork things. So if you're doing too much, it's kind of a delicate balance, right? Like we don't want to overwork it. Because you can tell when you look at a painting that's been overworked, it loses that freshness that we love about watercolor. And so here, I wanted to mention something. White fur, you really don't have to paint the fur, but you do paint the shadows. And so painting white fur is like a negative. You're doing like a negative effect. A negative painting where you're not painting the fur, you're painting the shadows. And so you just kind of have to look at those. And then shadows have a temperature. Sometimes they're warmer, sometimes they're cooler. Something that you can do to figure that out is bring the photo, the reference photo, into Photoshop, Procreate, Canva, and use an eyedropper tool and hover it over the shadows of the fur. And then look at, like, you know, the circle that shows you like the whole spectrum of the rainbow. It will show you what the temperature is. And that will help with your shadows. And here I'm just darkening things that need darkening. Okay, so this is really fun. At the end, I've been adding some opaque white, and I love this Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleedproof white. It's like a paste. It's water-based. And I like to use my tiny little brush, and I use the lid as my little palette. And I love adding just some little highlights back to my paintings. It just makes them pop. Now, you have to use this sparingly, and you really want to be careful with opaque mediums because they can dull your painting. And like I said, you can lose that freshness. And so you want to use those opaque whites sparingly. Here I'm doing some lifting, and I'm using these cheap craft brushes from Hobby Lobby. They're really stiff, so they're really good for scrubbing and lifting. I'm not about to use my expensive or soft squirrel hair brushes for scrubbing and lifting. So get yourself a set of cheap Royal and Langnickel, I can't even say it, brushes from, I get them at Hobby Lobby, Walmart has them. Just get a set. They have round, they have flats, they have all sizes of those in one pack. And so you're always going to have a cheap, like hard bristled brush for lifting and scrubbing. And do you see what a difference that makes? Just like pulling those highlights back out. I'm constantly squinting at my reference photo. And the reason I squint is it helps, like the highlights and the darkest values, it helps them to kind of like show up for me. I'm not focusing on details, I'm focusing on shapes, and I'm focusing on values. And I have completely let it dry. I've signed it. and I'm ready to go. So I've got my gloves on, and this is the product that I use to seal my commissions. So this is called DORLAND'S Wax Medium by Jacquard, and it is a translucent compound of waxes and resin. And I have been using this for several years now. It is amazing. It makes it waterproof. Because it has resin in it, it dries hard. So it's not like wax where it's going to be sticky or anything. So the reason I wear gloves is because it is kind of waxy and resiny, and I just like to protect my hands. And I like to use paper towels. This is like one of the things I use paper towels for in my studio. And I'm going right on in, right on my painting. It will not smear my painting. As long as it's completely dry, it's not going to smear. So let's go ahead and seal this bad boy. I just grabbed a big old nasty glob, and I'm just gonna go. The first time I did this, I'm not gonna lie, I was terrified. I was sure we were gonna smudge. But I just make sure to get it on every area, including the white of the paper. I will mention this paper right now is properly stretched using gummed paper tape onto a board. And I will wait 24 hours for this to completely dry before removing this painting from the board. Because in the past, I have sealed it and then removed the paper from the board, and my paper buckled, because essentially I'm adding something to it that as it dries might cause some wrinkling, buckling. So I also love how this, it almost creates like a deepening. It gives it like a depth. It is matte. It's not shiny. However, if you want it to be more shiny, you can buff it. You can do a final buffing after it's dry, but I don't, because it's watercolor and I want it to be matte. My paper had a little dust on it, and so that's why if you see any little specks, that's what it is. And you can just get those off before it dries. So like any little specks you don't want on there, now's your time. But you see, nothing is moving, and I'm giving some pressure here. And as you will see, after this completely dries, this painting is now waterproof. All right, so I'm going to remove my gloves. It is kind of hard to wash your hands. Like if you decide not to wear gloves, just be aware it's kind of hard to wash your hands with this because it is a resist medium. All right, look at that. I just love the depth it gives. And I really like the smell of it. I don't know if I'm weird or what. So there you have it. Okay, it's the next day, and this is good and dry, and I'm ready to cut it off the board. So when you properly stretch your paper to a board, it's not like peeling tape off. However, I did put tape over this so that I could have this little white border here. But I do have to cut this off. This part will be hidden under the frame. So my client intends to frame this, so it's okay if I have a little bit of the gummed paper tape on the edge. So this is pretty simple. Just gonna use this box cutter. I wanna make sure to get it right. One of my favorite parts of this, cutting this off, is there's a moment where it releases the pressure and there's a crack. Now I just have to take this over to my paper trimmer and trim up the edges a little bit. But look how flat that is. It's so perfect, ready for framing. And here it is. It's ready for my client to frame. I'm really happy with how Goose turned out, and I think he's one of my favorite pet portraits I've ever done, which is saying a lot. Normally when I do a pet portrait, I mount it and put it in a white matte border. But this time the client's gonna go ahead and just frame these cuties. I just think 4 of them along the wall is gonna be so cute. So I always have a plastic sleeve. This one's a little bit big, so I am going to make it work. I have signed it, as you can see here. Okay, so I've taken off the sticky. I buy these at Hobby Lobby. You can get them on Amazon. I just think it adds a professional touch. This is my first time ever handing over a pet portrait without a mat, so it's a little strange for me. There we go. It's all packaged up. Looks so good. 3 more to go. So thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, as always, please drop them in the comments. I just hope you have an amazing day. So dumb. Oh. I'm ready for a nap. I hope you have an amazing day. Peace out. Seriously, leave. Like, go do something else.